Welcome back to Let's Make a Game, a channel about making computer role-playing games using the free program Twine and the Sugarcube format for Twine. In this video, I would like to continue talking about my current project of coding the combat system for a viewer's game. This is really mostly just a sort of quick progress report, I guess, of what I've been doing. I haven't made a video in quite a long time by my standards. That's partly because I've been debugging the sort of main version of the program. As you probably know, if you've been following this series, I'm making this game for someone else, and they've sort of started coding their adaptations to my code, and I've been helping them sort of with a couple of problems that they've run into doing that. And that's partly why I haven't posted for a while. It's also I've been working on a completely separate project. But the main thing that I wanted to talk about, as you can see, I've started a combat and I've looked in my inventory and we can see that there is a new weapon, the hunting rifle, which I can equip and use as normal if I wanted to do that. And that's because I have gone through the list of weapons, which the person whose game this is going to be has provided me with, and I've added all of the weapons in that list. So that it now has all of the weapons that there should be. So I'll just very quickly go through the code. So here we are in the game. Most of it is done in initialize. Let's just zoom in. There we go. That makes it slightly easier. And as you will know, if you've been following this series, the weapon details are stored all the way down the bottom of the screen in two arrays, WEA underscore OVR, which stands for weapon overview, which gives the overall details of the weapon. What's it called? A little blurb about it, although that blurb as of now isn't used anywhere, but it's in there for, I assume it's going to be displayed in the inventory eventually. And then it has how many ways there are to attack with a weapon and how many hands it needs. Is it a two-handed weapon or a one-handed weapon? So for example, the hunting rifle says hunting rifle in slot 0. That's obviously its name. The scope is tuned up and ready to go. A little description of, not really a description of it, but just a little bit of what might be called flavor text if we were doing a collectible card game. That's often the term they use there. And then it's got one way to attack and it uses two hands. And then there are other slots to this array, but those slots are set up by the program itself rather than being sort of typed in by me. The program will look at particular things and set particular arrays to particular values if they find, for example, one that has at least one throwing and one hand-to-hand attack, for example. And then the other array that we use is WEA underscore ATT, which stands for weapon attacks, and it has the details of the individual attacks. So the assault rifle has 2 attacks, and so there's an entry for assault rifle 1 and assault rifle 2, which differ in the way that they use ammunition, essentially. Now, most of this stuff, I've already done the code for how ammunition works, lowering the number of shots you've got left, how throwing a weapon works, and so on. So most of it, I really just needed to put the details in the in these two arrays. But there was one that I needed to do a tiny bit of coding with, and that was the sawed-off shotgun, which has only close range, but which uses sneaky instead of strong. As you might expect, hand-to-hand weapons have only close range, and then guns and sort of things you can throw, like grenades, have a longer range, and the hand-to-hand weapons use the strong attribute, and the ranged weapons use the sneaky attribute, and that sort of makes sense. But there are a couple of exceptions. The katana is obviously a close range weapon, and it uses sneaky for one of its attacks rather than strong. And now we have another one, which is the sawed-off shotgun, which only has close range, but because it is a more of a ranged aiming sort of weapon than a sort of brute force weapon, that I assume that's the logic anyway, it uses sneaky. So how do we make that happen? Well, we actually just do what we did with katana, which is there's a couple of places in this code where PC side attacks. This passage deals with both the player character attacking and companions attacking. Once you've decided on an attack, the code, it works the same way, although the method of deciding the attack, of course, is different because the player decides what the player character is going to do by definition, and the computer decides what the companions are going to do, although the player can influence that with their orders. But anyways, what we need to do, there are two places, because you add sneaky or strong to both your attack roll to see if you hit and to your damage. So what we did initially is we looked in weapon underscore attack x1, which is where the range is, and if that equals 0, well, that's a close range attack, and so we need to set x2, which is the temporary variable we're using for which attribute are we looking at. We need to set that to 1 because strong is attribute 1. Otherwise, we set it to 3. But there's a couple of exceptions, which are the katana and the sawed-off shotgun. So we actually say, well, if the range is 0 and the name of the attack, that's $X, does not equal katana 1, and the name of the attack does not equal sawed-off shotgun 1. In all of those cases, then use strong. And of course, that means that if the name of the attack is katana 1 or sawed-off shotgun 1, then we will instead use attribute 3, which is to say sneaky. And that's for the attack roll, and then we just need to do something similar when we're dealing with the damage, because strong and sneaky, as I say, they both add to the roll, and they increase the damage. So here we have exactly the same code, except we happen to be using a different temporary variable. We're using $W instead, but it just says if weapon underscore WEA underscore ATT X1 is equal to 0 and X does not equal katana 1 and X does not equal sawed-off shotgun 1, then we set W to 1, i.e. we use strong, otherwise we use sneaky, and that ensures that if the attack is katana 1 or sawed-off shotgun 1, then we will use sneaky. And it might seem a little inelegant to sort of specify that by hand, like we've got this sort of long string of exceptions, and if we kept, well, we've only got 2, but it does sort of seem inelegant. It sort of feels like, well, shouldn't we be able to put a flag in the array somewhere that says this is a special case, this is a short range weapon but uses sneaky, and then have the code look at that slot and work it out based on that. And if we had more weapons, that would, like, the more weapons we have, the more likely that is to become true. The more data you're dealing with, the more likely it is that a sort of coded solution like that would be better. And the less data you're dealing with, the more likely it is that just sort of hand write an exception. Just say, well, if it's this, or, if it's this attack or this attack, don't do it. Like, if there were 20 weapons that had this characteristic of being short-range attacks but use sneaky, well, obviously it would be pretty clunky to go, and X does not equal this, and X does not equal that, and X does not equal the other, and, for 20 different exceptions. But if there's only 2, it's probably less work to do it this way. So that's a sort of general rule that I've noticed. Do I do a kind of more elegant coded solution where we have a special flag that indicates that this class of objects behaves differently? In other words, do I sort of treat this as a special category which has its own code? Or do I just sort of hand write in the exception? Do I just code the general rule and then say, well, but if X equals katana 1, do something different? Well, the question of which one's the best approach is dependent on how many instances of that data are going to be special cases. Once I got up to sort of 4 or 5 weapons that behaved like this, I would probably not do it this way. I'd have a special flag, and I'd just say if weapon attack X1 equals 0 and weapon attack X6 doesn't have that specific flag. But with as we have it with just 2, and I don't think we're going to add any more weapons, this is probably the better approach, the easier approach. Anyway, that's what I've done. All the weapons are done. There are some special sort of behaviors of the weapons that I haven't done yet. A couple of the new weapons that I add do fire damage, but I'm not. I've asked the person whose game this is going to be exactly how that works, and I'm waiting on their response before I code it, obviously, because I don't know exactly what to do. But I have done all the weapons. So I have a couple of special attacks still to code. And after that, I'm not exactly sure, but it looks like we'll be sort of approaching the end of this project, which is nice. This has been the longest project I've done on this channel. There might be more stuff that I have to do that's sort of off the channel, like helping the person whose game this is going to be debug their version of the program, etc. But in terms of stuff on this channel, I will probably be starting a new project reasonably soon. So perhaps next video I'll talk about some my ideas for what the next project's going to be. But I will leave it there for now. I hope that was useful or interesting to at least some of you, and I hope you will tune in next time.